Hello, everyone, and welcome back to On the Curbs. I'm your host, Nate Woods. We are going over the 2025 Indy next season in this episode, and I'm joined once again by my co-host, Mr. Thiemo Albers-Daly. Thiemo, how we doing?
Good, thank you, Mr. Woods. I'm glad we're finally getting around to talking about Indy Next for more than a minute. We keep saying all season that we're going to be talking about Indy Next at some point, and we finally got there. There was always something going on that didn't feel right to just shoehorn in part of a season, partway through the season. So that we're going to have to try and tackle this in some kind of entirety, and then obviously that means to wait until the end of the season. So
Typically, when
it's
we
it's
were,
not that we dislike Indy Next; it's just
yeah,
we wanted to try and do it properly.
it seemed like typically when we were covering Indy next, it was like, oh, by the way, Dennis Hauger won again.
Yeah, it was this awkward thing of it was mirroring IndyCar the whole season, and you get glimmers of hope from other drivers coming and winning occasionally, but it was more
Yeah,
or less the Palou show or the Hauger show,
yeah,
and that was great because for Dennis Hauger fan that I am, and more so now this season that he's been able to do this, it's been a great kind of overall story for him in terms of redemption if you followed his career up until this point. But if you just come across him for the first time, this Norwegian fella comes along and goes, I like what that Louis Foster did last year. I'm going to copy that.
I'm gonna try
And
that.
everyone else be damned. And all the people that were there last season with Foster going, oh, come on. What have
And
we
then
got to
just
do?
and then just hope that you don't get stuck with a team like Ray Hall Letterman, Lanigan when you move up. So yeah,
Well, he's already succeeded there because he's with Dale Coyne for next year.
yeah,
So
that's right.
he's
Yeah.
it's going all right for
Dennis Hauger notwithstanding, we can't, as much as we'd love to pick him as the driver of the year, it's kind of like the Alex Palou show, as you mentioned. It's like, it, who was the next best driver in your eyes for this year?
him. Yeah. I think with Dennis Howard, like you say, because he was so dominant, it's the obvious choice, and it'd be an incredibly short section because we both agree and move on immediately. And that's
Yeah,
not in the same way that with Chloe, it's not to diminish what he achieved because I wasn't sure what he could achieve because he'd had a rough few years in Formula Two after dominating in F3, and this was, as I was alluding to earlier, the perfect countermeasure to his overall career. And he's now a very exciting driver again, and people over in Red Bull in Europe are maybe looking at him going, could we have made more of an effort to keep him around because he
yeah.
could have been the answer to our Red Bull problems? Who knows? But that kind of humble pie aside, I've gone with Miles Rowe for my driver of the year, and not too difficult to see why, I don't think, because yeah, we had some other drivers winning, but he won two races, and both in quite memorable style, I thought. He fought hard for both of them, and it just seemed like the natural next step for him. Yeah, he was in Indy next last season. He's coming back again next season, which I was hoping would be the case. We talked a couple of times about would he move up, and you're of the mind that he's going to get a chance to qualify at least for the Indy 500. But I didn't think he should have anything more than that because I don't want drivers often to be shimmied through before they're ready for something. And I think he'd probably do all right in a full season of IndyCar. But I'm glad he's taking that extra year and Indy next. And there's no real need to rush. He's not getting on in years. He's
Yeah.
not he's not being put out of past just yet. And this just felt like the next obvious choice because you had Collette, you had Hughes, and they did a great job. But I thought Miles Rose putting something together here. He's cooking nicely, and barring anyone coming in for Indy next year in the same style that Louis Foster and Dennis Hauger have done, and going, I'll have also some of that, please. We might actually get a really even and competitive season next year, and he's teed himself up really nicely for that with his consistency this year.
Yeah, I think that I would agree. He definitely improved over last year. Last year, I think he finished what, seventh or eighth in the points. I don't have that number right in front of me, but
He
it
11 in
seemed
the points last year in his rookie
11th,
season.
but yeah. So, to definitely see him move up to fourth in the points this year shows definitely a marked improvement. Now, you know, the 2026 campaign is going to kind of be I think, the deciding factor. I think typically with Indy Next drivers, you know, if they don't come in and instantly move out of the series onto something else, they get three chances. And, if you can't show your mettle in those second and third seasons, you're going to have a tough time making it to IndyCar.
We
And I
say the
think,
same in Formula Two. You have the
yeah,
three approaches. You come in and you Oscar Piastri and you nail it immediately. You take a Mick Schumacher approach. You warm up that first season. You nail it the second, or you
yeah,
go hell for leather with that third season and hope for the best. That this is what you can do. And I don't think he's on a hope for the best situation for next season. But there is that pressure, like you say, of if you can't win it next year, or at least be within 5 points, say, let's say it's an incredibly competitive season. If you're not in incredible touching distance, then yeah, it's going to be tricky because I don't know where you go after that for him because I feel like you've got all these other junior series elsewhere in the world, but you obviously don't automatically track to that. Whereas in America, I feel like if you're not going to IndyCar, single seater options on a high level aren't really there. So
right.
I don't know what you do.
Yeah.
Um, but he only had one bad result, which was Detroit, which where he was classified in P18. The rest of the time, he didn't finish outside the top 10 once this season, which is
Yeah. Very
incredible.
true. Yeah.
Um, so only 2 wins. You think, how has he only got 2 wins and how is he fourth? But he's like, yeah. When I say consistent, I mean hella consistent.
Yeah. For me, driver of the year, I'm going with Lockie Hughes. Um, you know, he he had a couple victories early in the season. It looked like, it was kind of like Kirkwood at the beginning of the IndyCar season, where it's like he seemed like he was going to be the heir apparent who was going to take the charge to Dennis Hauger. After the first 6 rounds, they were the only two drivers that had won a race. And I think it was
And
four
so we
races
were
for
really getting a
Hauger,
sense of
two for
deja vu with that from
right.
IndyCar. It's like,
Yeah,
come on, give us
yeah.
something.
I had a note here. Unfortunately, he's driving in the same era as Dennis Hauger. You know, if
It's
if
the
Dennis
Kurt
Hauger,
Collette Dewey Foster problem from
yeah,
last year. It's
right,
again immediately, isn't it?
yeah, and Lucky Hughes, rookie driver this season in Indy Next. We watched him come up a couple years ago through the USF Pro series in 2000 series, and uh, really impressed me at the Indy GP races when I was working out there at the track 2 years ago. Uh, if he would have had a better second half of the season, I think he definitely could have taken the charge to Cal Colette. I mean, Blocky Hughes finished third in his rookie campaign in the Indy NXT series, and so ended the season with those two victories. Still had a good amount of podiums, but definitely room for improvement. I think this next year, you know, we've got a few drivers that aren't moving on, and that are solidly in the top 10 that can really uh, make for a good series for next year if we don't end up having another Dennis Hauger
Yeah,
come in
I'm just
and
looking
just
at
sweep everything.
I'm just looking at his results there, and it's just the 16 in Iowa and the 15
Yeah,
in Laguna Seca that put him
yeah,
out. Really, everything else you go, well, what more do you want? And you then look at Bless and Hauger and you go, bugger. Because there's just they've got both one race each where they don't do well.
yep,
Alabama for Collette and Laguna Seca as well for Hauger.
right.
Um, but the rest of the time they're pretty bulletproof. Their bad races are still firmly inside the top 10, and you go, it's you've not really done anything wrong. It's just they've done everything really right, and you can't really do much against that,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
One thing I will always remember about Lockie Hughes, and this is forever. No matter what he does in motorsports, he could be a 4-time Indy 500 champion someday. But one fact I will always remember about him is 2 years ago, working out the Indianapolis Motor Speedway in the media center, and I was reading all of the USF 2000 Pro Driver profiles, and his listed that he had a pet alligator.
Would stick in the memory.
Yeah. So I got to ask him about it, and he confirmed. He's like, yes, I do have a pet alligator, and that's not
It's the
something I
kind
would
of
have
thing
expected.
you don't expect to read it. You don't know what you're going to do with the information once you've confirmed it, but you want to know
Yeah.
more.
How do you take that pet to the track for race weekends, or
It'd be an interesting way to try and intimidate the opposition just out in pit lane walking.
who do you have to bribe back home to pet sit for you while you're going to America to
Hmm.
run?
Do you mind pet sitting? Sure. What have you got? Dog, cat? Well, it could eat both of those depending on the size.
That's right. Well, who was your underrated driver for 2025? And I do want to preface, we did discuss this short, very shortly before we started recording because I just want to make
You're
sure that
intrigued.
I was intrigued. I just want to make sure that you had picked the correct driver and this wasn't uh, a typo. But go ahead.
This is a hell of a typo. I got all of both of the names incorrect from someone else. No, I was looking down the list for the championship this year, and you've got a mix of drivers that have been there before and been in single seaters for a good while and all that sort of thing. And then you got P14, which joined P14 but ahead on countback, which is interesting. 202 points for the season for Haley Egan, and that's my underrated drive for this season. And the reasoning behind it is, yes, there's no top 10 finishes. Got close on a couple of occasions with P12 and a P11 in Laguna Seca, but it is her first full season, and I think her first time ever, if I'm remembering correctly, in single seater racing. She's done off roading and stock cars, I think,
Stock
in
cars, yeah.
anything except single seater.
Mhm.
And so when she was announced as coming into Indy Next, I was quite perplexed by the sudden move because normally you
We
stick
all
with
were.
single seaters.
We
Yeah,
all were.
you kind of it's not unheard of to switch between disciplines as such. I mean, you see endurance racing and single seater as being one of the more common things, but if you're talking about, say, two wheels to four, that's less common. And if you see off-road single seater or single seater off-road, that's also quite uncommon. The slightly bigger example that you've seen the last couple of years is Leah Block going over to F1 Academy and trying hand in single seater there. It's the only kind of comparison I've got because while that's a lesser car, it's the only there's so few instances of it happening. I don't have any of the comparison points for it. So I was intrigued to see because I think this would be the equivalent of putting Leah in an F2 car with no experience.
Mhm.
And so I wasn't expecting kind of much. Anyway, the bar was low, but I just thought it's going to be interesting to see because a lot of the drivers we see coming into Indy next season, they don't last the full season for whatever reason.
Mhm.
Um, some come in, but they've got plenty of experience elsewhere, and they do well, but then they leave again, all this sort of thing. Whereas she was just there in the background for the most part, and I don't recall seeing her too much in any of the races, but stayed out of trouble for the most part, was consistent, got points on the board, and finished ahead of a couple of other full-time drivers who you'd argue should be maybe more ahead. I mean, I don't have as much of a knowledge base on someone like Nolan Alla, but Tommy
Mhm.
Smith was in Formula 3 a year or two ago, I think. And I would have thought, while he didn't do tremendously well there, I would have thought that it's a pretty good experience to get. He should be ahead. So the fact that they were level on points, I thought was something where like, okay, it's not necessarily something to write home about, but it's underrated. So I'm really underlining the underrated aspect of this section. Um, so that's why I want for it. 'Cause it's the first full season in single seaters, and I don't think any of us were really expecting much of anything. So I was like, you know what? I don't know if she's coming back next year. I don't know if she's like, well, that's enough of that. I'm going to go back to off road racing, and that's been enough of my single seater phase out
Yeah.
of the way, and I just need to get that out of my system. But held her own against a couple of drivers where I would have maybe expected more from. So why not be a bit different? I'm not going to convince you, I don't think, but
No, no. As an American, having watched her come up through NASCAR ladder, it's like, why is she, when it was announced that she was coming to Indy next, I'm like, I think we might have even talked about it here on the show last, in the off season last year. It's like,
hmm,
what is happening? What's going on here? But you're right.
there's left field and there's left field.
She did keep her nose down. Towards the end of the season, she started getting closer and closer into that top 10. was staying out of trouble for the most part. With that, I can't agree with you on that. But most
I'd like to
underrated
test you.
driver of 2025, I think there was probably several drivers that deserve that.
I will save myself before I switch to you and who you chose, which is saying I just said underrated. I didn't say most underrated. So I'm going to use that to its full
Okay.
advantage.
All right. Well, I personally did pick my most underrated driver. Salvador de Alba is who I chose for this season. He's in
Also
his
a fair
second.
choice.
Yeah.
If you couldn't have Haley because you didn't want to clash with me, then
Sure.
Salvador is the
Yeah.
next logical step. Yeah.
Yeah, he's in his second year. This was his second full year campaign for Indy Next, and like Miles Rowe showed a really marked improvement. Um, but I feel like he kind of flew under the radar this season for a lot of people because although he was, you know, pretty consistently finishing in the top 10, he didn't get his
Mm,
first podium of the season until Iowa,
yeah.
the ninth race of the season, and uh, led the most number of laps. Outside of Dennis Hauger. So he led the second
I was going
most
to say,
number of laps. Yeah,
it'd be a hell of a
he
trick for Dennis Howard to have
I
still done all
think
of that
what
without leading
100
anything.
yeah 135 laps I think this season that he led, and finally ended up getting maiden victory there at Milwaukee. They're in the next last race of the season, and so um,
Finished strong
kind
with
of
with another podium as well in Nashville. He got
yeah
so he kind of built up to it and got there eventually. And it's
yeah.
not again, it didn't do anything expressively wrong. You look at the results, and only two outside of the top 10, but everything else above him was just so much more. It's just so much more.
Yeah,
And
and I
again, it's
think
kind of like, how do you compete with that?
yeah, and I think he's one of those drivers. With in IndyCar, we kind of built up that we were going to have this race in Mexico City in 2026, which didn't end up happening on the schedule. But I think that there is a big contingent of Mexico that wants to see IndyCar come to their country. I think IndyCar wants to go to their country. I think it just didn't work out for
Hmm.
this year. And I think Salvador is, hailing from Mexico, is one of those drivers that country is excited about
Hmm.
and has a big following there. And I think, next
And it makes
season
sense to take Indy next as well there if you are
yeah,
taking IndyCar there.
and he's one of those drivers that's carrying the flag, and you know, next season will be the deciding factor for him. I think the momentum is definitely in his favor,
Hmm.
um, where he's going to be a top driver next season. I think.
Well, we talk about how it's difficult to carry momentum forward from one season to the next just because of the sheer length of the off season. But he had those two very strong final rounds, one of which was a victory and the second was a second. And I think that's nice to have in the back pocket because he was the most successful driver of the top, actually of the grid, actually, in those last two races. When you look at
Mhm.
it, a win and second
Yeah,
above him, sixth and a first. Okay, one's good, the other less so. Third and a fifth, that's fine. Seventh and a fourth, nothing to write home about. Second and third, and that's then it's Hauger then. And that's like,
yeah,
yeah, that's not bad. But again, you're kind of you're on the same level as Hauger towards the end of the season, and that's a nice kind of benchmark to have to remind yourself when you're kind of deep in December, January time, thinking,
Mhm.
oh, can I still can I still carry this forward for next year? And go, actually, no, you know what? I wasn't that far away in the grand scheme of things.
yeah. And one last thing about him is, he races for Andretti Global, which now you almost have that added incentive of, all right, I'm in a feeder series for an F1 team. You know, uh, 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 you
Yeah,
know,
it's
it's kind of a backwards way of getting there, where almost any driver in F1 now is coming up through F3, F2, but now we're seeing Colton Herta making the jump from IndyCar to F1, and it's like, oh, this is a legitimate ladder that we can be in.
mm,
It's kind of an
it's
extra,
kind of if he can make that well, we'll keep an eye on
yeah,
that.
an
There's
extra
potential
little
opportunities for us.
just a little extra carrot that drivers in the Andretti Global organization, even in Indy Next, can reach
Well,
for.
because even if you get only. into an FP1 session, say once or twice a season in F1 as part of
Yeah.
this, even if you don't get that ultimate seat in F1, that's just putting you on such a different stage that you'll get the attention of people that wouldn't necessarily see you otherwise. So just that alone, and to go, you made it
Yeah.
that far, and we know how competitive F1 seats are, could then still really help the career in a bunch of other ways. So yeah, it's a nice little carrot to have on top of all the other regular carrots.
Yeah. So what was your favorite race? You have Grand Prix written down here. What was your favorite Grand Prix? But we had some ovals
Well,
in
they
there.
have Grand Prix in the title. I'm
Yeah.
counting it. Um, yeah, I was going through the race highlights this morning just to remind myself of what had been happening this season because it was all a bit of a blur in my mind. Um, but two that are coming to mind. I think Detroit was fun because it was just that was the right kind of chaos. I thought it's kind of there's a battle of survival. You had the bridge blocked, which I'm surprised that doesn't happen more often, which proved to be a great visual of if you're the first few cars, you're fine. Everyone else, you're not getting over that because it's been congested in the ultimate fashion there at the start because everyone just piled up into each other and they had to then try and figure out how to untangle everyone. But then I was looking at races later on in the season, and the Lockie Hughes victory at Gateway, that was in St. Louis, that was
That
just
was a
such a
fun
good
race.
race. I
That was a
thought
fun
I
race.
really liked that, and you know, I think you had um, Dennis Hauger out of position there, out of position being fifth, admittedly, but you know, for him out of position, you had Kyle Collette in third, that he was slightly out of it as well. And Miles Rowe was edging nearer to the front of the field there as well. He was in second. I just thought, yeah, that that for me just seemed fun because everything just seemed close throughout. And I think you do have that benefit, I think, on the ovals of everything is going to be a bit closer just because of the nature of it. But at the same time, why not also choose that as a good reason for that to be the best race of the year? So I'm going
Yeah.
with that. What about yourself?
For me, I'm going Indy GP Race One. Obviously, anytime you can go to a race in person, it makes it a little bit better. But the start of that race was absolutely
Hmm.
amazing. You thought, Lockie Hughes was on the pole for both races. And the start of that race, you
We've
had,
both chosen races that went well for Lockie Hughes, I've
yeah,
noticed.
Lockie, Dennis Howard was starting on the outside, and then Miles Rowe had made a really good move going into turn one. But the three of them, I don't want to say tangled, but they all bumped. And Dennis Hauger uh, was kind of came out on the losing end there. Had to take the escape road and um, rejoined the pack basically at the end. I think he came back on the track in 19th position out of 20. And, um, you know, Lockie ended up winning the race, but you got to see Dennis Hauger work his way through traffic. I think he still ended up finishing eighth in that race. Let's see,
Yeah, eighth in that race.
Indianapolis,
So he went
eighth.
from the back
Yeah,
to eighth, and
yeah.
yeah, it's kind of it's
And
always that nice thing of if you're out of position as a driver that's been dominant, can you actually work your way through?
yeah,
It's the next test for a dominant
yeah,
driver. Like, okay, yeah, we get you can lead from pole, but can you get back through if you
right.
end up at the back? Kind of
What should have
it's
been
Verstappen
a
in Spa, Hamilton in Brazil sort of thing. Oh, you can
exactly.
do it. Excellent.
Yeah, yeah. It's like what should have been a absolute abysmal day for him. He turned into a top 10, was the second worst finish of the season with an
Was
eighth place
eighth.
finish. Yeah. And, he just proved that he was human. And although maybe, a little bit more than human, being able to come from 19th to 8th over the course of the race.
Especially
But
when you think about that, arguably that is his worst result because Laguna yeah, okay, classify a 16th, but he crashed out there. And you think,
yeah.
okay, so you're technically your worst race finish of races you finished was eighth place,
And
which
if I
does kind of
if I remember correctly, Callum Hedge, he finished fourth in that race. It seems like he was
hmm,
running in the podium most of the race. I think it was um,
there's Miles Rowe that
Miles
was
Rowe, I
getting him.
think, tracked him down there in the closing laps, if I remember right. And so, I mean, it just made it was a race where so often in a series like Indy Next, you almost have a follow the leader. it's a series that's not necessarily known for a lot of on track action. And I think part of that might be that they run at the big tracks with the big cars
Hmm.
instead of a medium-sized track for the medium-sized cars. And so sometimes the product on track can be lacking, I think. Um,
So I think the ovals work
but I
so well
think
for them because it's just kind of
yeah,
it's a big track, big cars, but in a more condensed way, if that
yeah.
makes sense.
But that Indy GP, that race one it was a good product. Lots of passing, lots of excitement on track, and yeah, that's why I'm going with
Fair enough.
it. What was your least favorite? I don't want to say worst. What was just your least favorite?
I was going to have to amend that as well because I was thinking about that with when we were going through the IndyCar season. It wasn't that there were bad races for me. It was just there were lots that were better than others, but they were
Mm,
still all good. So I just remember the season opening. I was pulling up between that and Alabama because Alabama was messy in the way I wasn't a big fan of. It was just very stop-starty with
mm.
everyone kind of crashing out left, right, and centre. But St. Peter, I just thought you had some interesting moments in there, but I think it was maybe just because I think maybe that's the thing with any first race of the season for most series is that it's the start of a new year. Everyone's just getting the cobwebs out and kind of dust themselves down. So you're not going to have the best product necessarily, unless you just finished the previous season 3 weeks before or something, which is not a recommendation. I don't want that. But that's the only way you're going to be able to carry that momentum forward a bit more. Whereas this one, they've not been racing for however long, so it was good, but I think still weakest for me. I'm intrigued about your choice though, because when I was going through the highlights this morning, I did watch this race, so I'm intrigued about what you mean.
So I went with Iowa, and
Mm.
you know, it's I think maybe I'm a little skewed in my thinking because I kind of have a love-hate relationship with Iowa. And you know, in my younger years when I worked for race team, we would travel to Iowa and run our super truck, and it was never a fun track. But this was a race where it rained during qualifying, so we didn't get a full qualifying session in. But then also the race itself, there was nobody there. I mean, nobody saw
Oh,
the
you
race.
meant nobody saw the race in that sense. I see what
Yeah.
you mean now.
I mean,
Yes.
Iowa,
I could swear I'm watching these highlights.
yeah, Iowa lost its, place on the IndyCar schedule. There was maybe a little politics involved with the high V debacle, but over the last couple of years, the attendance at Iowa has been lacking. I mean, how many people were at the IndyCar race for Iowa?
Well, yeah, no
Maybe,
point.
maybe 15, 20,000 people in the grandstands at a track that can hold over 100,000.
Mm.
And you have to extrapolate that down for Indy Next.
Yeah,
There would have been
unfortunately.
maybe several thousand people in the grandstands for the Indy Next race there, which there were probably more people at Thermal Club for the IndyCar race. And
It's bad when you're
so,
saying that.
yeah. And so I think, that was not that the racing wasn't bad. I
I was
mean,
saying, 'cause I thought the
obviously,
racing itself was all right. I thought when I was
yeah.
watching it back
Yeah.
going, I don't know why he's
Yeah.
chosen this.
Yeah. Miles Rowe won, main victory for him. Um, but all in all, I just felt like such a downer of a weekend for this series
Well,
that, we're trying to build this series and make it, in an American context, make it like the Busch series in NASCAR.
mm,
Where, you know, the product on track should be just as good, if not better sometimes than the big cars. And, when you go to places like Iowa where, you know, the the race might be broadcast on some really obscure channel and that you can't find on most television
that's the thing,
providers.
isn't it? The
It,
racing can be excellent, but if no one's watching it because it's not
right.
been advertised or sold or whatever
Yeah.
properly, then
Yeah.
it does take the sting out of it a bit, and you're going, you're that with the two people going, how great is
Yeah.
Iowa? And it's like they raced in Iowa.
Yeah, yeah. It's like you have to wait until Monday morning when the highlight package comes out. And now
Hmm.
36 hours removed from the race and you've seen it in the
You've already
newspaper. Like,
seen
oh,
who's come
yeah,
where
it's
already.
like, oh, okay, well, fair enough. Moving on. So hopefully, I hope that Fox, now that they are part owners of the series, um, and the IndyCar ladder, I'm hoping that they will put a little bit more effort into Indy Next for
Hmm.
2026, 2027, moving forward. Um, I'm not saying that I expect, you know, all 14, 15 races to be on Fox or Fox
Well,
Sports
we'll put them
One,
somewhere.
but make it accessible for people that want to
Hmm.
watch it. Um,
Yeah. Maybe I love the 5 minute highlights that we get on YouTube, but at the same time, I wouldn't mind what they do with IndyCar as well and have the extended highlights
yes,
later as well,
exactly.
if that
Yeah.
was a possibility.
What was your favorite moment of 2025?
I've gone a bit left field again here, which is probably a pattern you're sensing is forming definitely at this point and will continue for the rest of this episode. I've gone for Juan Manuel Correa's podium in Detroit. He finished in P3 on that occasion, which was his first race. Let me just have a look. No, that was his third race because he came in
Mhm.
for the two Indy races and then Detroit was the next one up. And the reason I've gone for him is just because I don't know how much you know about him and his history in motorsport, Nate, but the podium here was just such a not necessarily a full circle moment, but just felt right because he was involved in a nasty incident in Spa a few years ago with Anton Hubert, who died as a result of that crash
Mm.
back in Formula Two, and he was the other car involved essentially, and he went through a whole time of having to walk again, learning how to do that, and people thought, oh yeah, it'd be nice if you get back in the car, but people thought it'd probably more of a Roman Grodon situation where you get a nice test session, and that's about it. That'll be the moment. And instead, he came back and he went into Formula Three and he went into Formula Two and he got on a podium in Formula Two last year. Um, for me, he did win a race in Spain, despite what the stewards then did afterwards. But in my mind, he still won that race. And then you weren't really sure where he was going to go next because the thing is, as decent a driver as he had been before the incident and after the incident, I don't know if there was ever a serious conversation about Formula One prospects. Um, just because, if nothing else, the much more limited availability of seats. Um, so IndyCar is where things then turn around a little bit. And I don't know if he's going to come back next season into Indy Next. I'd quite like him to because he didn't do too badly. I mean, like you say, he got this podium. He had three other top 10 finishes in the races that he did appear in. He wasn't there for the whole season, unfortunately. But um, I just thought after everything that he's been through and he's kept proving himself and that he's capable of at least tussling it hard with people and then getting to go up against Dennis Hauger as well, who he used to
Mhm.
compete against, to be on a podium with him after a crazy race where you've got to just survive a lot of it to take advantage of opportunities. I thought that was a really nice moment and a nice bridge of the gap between the European series, the American series, and then having essentially three former F2 and F3 drivers on the podium as well in Indy Next because Kyle Collett was also on the podium on that
Yeah.
occasion. I just thought that's quite fun that that happens. I don't know how often that does. I'll have to go back and have a look at that one because I'll know the names immediately. But that would be something we should do in the off season, more in the off season.
Yeah. Any word on where he's gonna land for
Not that
2026?
I've seen yet. Again, I'd love him to come back, but have a
Yeah.
full season, and not just because he had a brilliant livery and I could spot him a mile off. And sometimes with these cars in both series, they're changing so frequently, it gets very annoying. And I'm like, at least I know I'm just going to root for that driver because I can spot him every weekend. That's and for no other reason.
Yeah. Yeah.
What
Yeah.
about
For
yourself?
me, I think my favorite moment was Miles Rowe winning the season finale. You know,
Hmm.
uh, yeah, he did it in great form. That was I would say Nashville probably when going back to favorite Grand Prix, I think Nashville might have been my second place.
I can say that's a
Uh,
good contender.
yeah, and uh, just fought hard. Really cool to see him get his second victory in the second half of the season, and that was I think when he won in Iowa. I think that might have been when we first mentioned, oh, maybe he could be a one-off driver at the Indy 500 next year.
Yeah, I think
And
that's
then
probably when we first mentioned
after
it.
the Nashville race, I'm like, yeah, I feel like he probably has, the marketability for a team to be like, yeah, we're going to take a chance on this kid and see what he can do in the month of May. He's already going to be here in Indianapolis anyway with Indy Next, so we might as well see what he can do, right?
Yeah, you make a compelling argument, Mr. Ross. I can't disagree with you on
Uh,
that one.
Looking at his record throughout the season, although he did well all season, I think he did a little bit better on ovals than he
Mm,
did on road and street courses. So I think that also works favorably for him to maybe land a one-off for IndyCar next year.
yeah, and the Indy 500 is the place to do it. And I think, as we've seen with a lot of the one-off drivers there this year and last year, and heck, most years,
Mm,
you don't have to do well, I say in
mm,
quotation marks, to do well, if that makes
mm.
sense. It's kind of
Right.
if you can survive it and get to the end in one piece, it doesn't matter too much where you finish because no one's expecting that much
That's
anyway.
exactly right.
And
Yeah.
it's that sort of thing. In the same way that you look at some of the older drivers who then come back in, thinking of Takuma Sato as the example that you go, oh, he's just there for a bit of fun, and then he's leading bits and he's on the
Yep.
podium places for duration. You're going, okay, calm down. We weren't expecting this from you. So it's difficult to lose in that situation, and I think just making it there in the same way that I was saying about FP1 sessions earlier for Andretti drivers in the future, it's just getting that exposure and people taking those like, oh, you're here. Doesn't matter how you do because wherever you've been that I've not seen you, you must be doing a good enough job to have earned the position here.
Yeah,
And that then speaks a lot if you're trying to get more sponsors and all that sort of thing.
absolutely. Yeah. Best battle of 2025.
I've got two here because you've gone a more traditional route, which
Yep.
I now maybe realise I should have taken that sort of approach to this question. Um, my battles are between drivers and circuits more specifically, although the
Ah.
second one is a battle between two drivers and then the circuit still won. So my first one, I'll go back through the highlights as I was saying earlier, and Will Missick and the Milwaukee Mile don't seem to get along too well. He had just over the course of that race just kept having these near misses with the wall and getting frightfully close at points and just unnecessarily putting everyone on the edge of their seat for that. And it was very entertaining, but I just thought, oh, this is when you have a short highlights package of 5 minutes, the fact that that's multiple instances in that 5 minutes shows that everyone was going kind of, you can always hear the commentary already going, jumping out of their skins when they see that. I did also think a shout out to Murray and Escotto in mid Ohio. You'll remember their big crash there.
Mhm.
It was quite a decent battle up to that point between the pair of them, and then just if we had a category for best crash, this would also win that, I think, because that was
Definitely.
done in
Yeah.
spectacular style,
Yes.
and right underneath one of the towers that overlooks the track as well. So you've kind of got the camera going, oh, we can't see anything because we're literally on top of it. So that for me, it just kind of it shows that it's the young drivers still trying to find their way in the motorsport world on this one, and sometimes it's not about you battling whoever else is on track. It's about you respecting the track.
Yeah. Yeah. That going back to the crash. Yes, I would agree. That would definitely win best crash of the season.
It was done properly, and I approve.
Yeah. For me, I went the unconventional route with picking a season-long battle, or at least a half a season-long battle.
We
Um,
both took the roads not taken.
That's right. The second half of the season, the shootout between Lockheed Hughes and Miles Rowe. Um, they, with Lockheed Hughes winning two of the first six races of the season, that put him a good amount ahead of everybody else. But as the season started to progress, you know, he finished 16th in Iowa in the same race where Miles Rowe won. And so that brought that point chase so close to where it was back and forth or real close to back and forth for that second half of the season. It was, you know, Miles Rowe did everything he could, especially in the last, you know, the last six races of the season to put the chase to Lockheed Hughes. And it was, it's kind of like the IndyCar season where, okay, Dennis Hauger, class of his own, like Pelot running away with it. We're halfway through the season. We're talking about mathematically who can make it, right? So,
Never good when we're already talking to mathematics that early
yeah,
on.
yeah. And so you start looking at other battles in the field, and this was the one that I thought really made the season, especially the second half of the season when we were kind of at that foregone conclusion that Dennis Hauger was going to win the championship. That
Mm.
it was fun to watch week in and week out.
And it got close in the end.
It did, yeah. I mean,
It was just
eight
12 points
points, yeah,
between them in the end, I think.
yeah,
Oh, 8 points, sorry,
points,
yeah, sorry, the
yeah,
other way.
yeah, and
But yeah, it's kind of mad that it comes down to that when you see the gaps between pretty much everyone else
right,
in the championship, and you've got to get to kind of outside the top 10 for it to be really close on points. You've got about 6 points between 10th and 11th. We had the count back that I was saying earlier, 14th and 15th, so to be up in the top echelons of it. And okay, yeah, Dentag runs away with it, and you've got what looks like big gaps between second and third. It's still a lot closer than you think to have it just be that much between third and fourth.
yeah,
It's nice.
yeah. 8 points is a podium finish essentially. The difference
Yeah.
between a win and a podium. So,
And so just looking, it's that the yeah, it's quite remarkable actually when you think about it. Because you're just looking at the results there, you're thinking that P16 for Hughes, but then that P18 for Miles,
yep,
and yet weirdly, it's the P15 in Laguna Seca for Hughes, and
right,
Lockie doesn't have another. Miles doesn't have another bad one. So you're going, how did
yeah,
he end up on top of this?
yep. I mean, it was, Miles Rowe, like I said, did everything. I mean, he finished, won the last race, and Lockheed Hughes finished fifth. If Lockheed would have finished, let's see, fifth pays 30. Yeah, I mean, if he would have finished 4 point or four positions down, we would have had a tie. But yeah, I think that was my favorite battle was in
Hmm.
that second half. Like I said, we knew that Lockheed Hughes pretty much had it wrapped up in the bag, and you're searching for that next battle to watch, and that was the one. It was fun.
Yeah.
So, who's your hard luck award for this
Got,
season?
got two here, just for the sake of they're very different from one another, and it feels odd to go through an entire Indy NXT 2025 season review and not really talk about Clark Collette.
Yeah,
So I want to he's kind of the special mention there because for the driver that finished in second overall, we've not talked about him at all
yeah,
really. Um, Mainly because of Helga Hughes and Rowe. Like you say, Hughes and Rowe have this battle between them. Collette, he looked like he was on to challenge. It was a kind of the battle award to Alex Palou for Indy
yep,
next. He went on that really impressive run of three races towards the end of the season. He won both of the races in Laguna Seca, led the most laps, was on pole. Then he got second place in Portland. But because Dennis Hauger is Dennis Hauger, none of that matters. And so even though he only had one finish outside the top 10 all season, which was way back at the start of the season, there was nothing he could do to deal with him.
yeah,
And I just feel like that's a bit of hard luck because what do you do in that situation? You've
right.
obliterated everyone else, and in 2024 he was third in his rookie season. So he's
Mhm.
thinking, okay, I've got rid of Foster, I've got rid of Abe. They've gone to IndyCar. Now's my time.
Yeah,
And then it's how goes, no,
that's a
I'm just
fast.
going to interrupt you slightly there.
Yeah.
And you think about who else he was racing last year. You've got Callum Hedge, you've got Salvador de Alba,
Mhm.
Bryce Aaron's then the next one. Miles Rome, we said earlier, he finished down in P11 last year. So the fact
Right.
that he's then a contender in there.
Yeah.
So Lucky Hughes comes in as a rookie and is up there. And you just think, my God, what does he have to do? Because he made the switch as well from I remember if he got to F2, he was definitely in F3. And obviously came with try his luck here. And I think what we were talking about Miles Rowe earlier rather, about next year being his third year and the pressure maybe on a little bit, but not as much as it would be for others in their third season. I think if Collette's back next year,
Mhm.
that's the kind of pressure that he's going to have as a third season driver. Because if he
Yeah.
doesn't get it done, I don't know where he ends up after that
Yeah.
because I
Right.
don't
Because
think the pathway is as clear for him.
there's not much room for him to move up in this series. In
No.
finishing second this year, you almost have to win next year for if you're him. For a driver like Miles Rowe, I think if he can finish in the top three next year, I can almost see giving him a fourth year in Indy next.
But at the same
But
time, you see Jacob Abel getting second, and okay, yeah, there's other factors at play there, but second is enough to get a seat in IndyCar if you've
yeah,
got the right backing.
right.
And sometimes, I've not seen it as much from Indy NXT to IndyCar, but you may do better in the big show than you do in the smaller show, just
Yeah,
because of driving styles and whatever. So, yeah, Percolette almost has to make sure that if nothing else, he beats at least Miles Rowe, regardless of whoever else is maybe ahead of them. But that's a whole kind of that's where the mathematics is going to come involved next year
yeah,
already. I can sense it.
yeah.
But the other driver I wanted to mention just quickly for hard luck was Sophia Firsch. She was in one round back in St. Petersburg at the start, had a great livery on the car, liked it. I'm a sucker for a good livery, in case you hadn't noticed that already. Um, and then just wasn't able to do it because of budget reasons. And I hate that that's the reason to not be able to keep going because you see some drivers at least get part of the season funded and at least you get a few chances to show it. And 12 in an opening race isn't bad. She'd come off the back of Formula 3 the season before. And so there was the potential there. I don't understand why there wasn't more financial backing for her. So I don't know if she's going to be able to come back in any form next year or what she's up to, but I just felt that was hard luck because it's the age old thing of the talent is potentially there, but if we don't get the chance to see it because of something stupid like this, then it makes the whole game a little bit more frustrating because you
Yeah,
just want to be able to if you get a full season and you're terrible, fine. I
yeah,
will be I don't mind then you shimming them off to one side and going, we're gonna get someone else. By all means do that. But I'd like to have the chance. It's the same thing with Logan Sargent in F1. I always think with rookies, 2 seasons is plenty of time for us to see what kind of a driver you are. And if you're terribly under that, by all means, go away.
yeah,
But I'd like to have at the very least, one full season, ideally two. So one race, in the same way
yeah.
that some drivers in F1 only got five at the start of the year, and then you're replaced, and no one really betters necessarily come in. Makes you go, well, what was the point in that then? Could you not have figured something out? Because you've
Yeah.
seen drivers in other series before work out their funding as they go along and they're making deals as they're heading to each new event and it's this really fun storyline going on as stressful as it must be for them. So it's a shame that something couldn't be worked out there and I want to see what the drivers can do.
Yeah. Well, and I think another unfortunate part for her in, just getting the one race, she was replaced in the next race by Evagoras Papasovas,
Mm.
and he goes out and finishes second in a car that the
It,
previous race had finished 12th. And it's like,
it's a frustrating thing because on the one hand you think how how much is circumstance, how much is race. You're not necessarily saying that if you reverse the roles that couldn't have been doable. It just obviously it doesn't
yeah,
look good for whoever was then first in
right.
the car,
The
right?
optics don't look good there.
Mm. And with people's attention spans, especially with money involved in sponsorship, you go, well, this driver finished second, this driver finished 12th. You don't, a lot of these people, they won't dive into the details then at all. They'll be going, well, no, why should I give you that? And they're like, damn it, listen to me.
For me, my hard luck award, I'm giving to Josh Pearson. Um, this is a driver that, he finished sixth in the points, which seems like kind of odd to name a hard luck award to somebody who finished sixth in the points. But he flew under the radar almost the entire season. And I think, he had, you know, dual podiums at Laguna Seca,
Hmm.
um, his only podiums of the season. But even with that, I feel like he wasn't being given the credit that he really deserved. He was one of the most consistent drivers in the field this year. Um, you know, outside of uh, you know, two 11th place finishes, one at Iowa and one at Milwaukee, he didn't finish outside the top 10. And somebody that is that consistent, that flies under the radar the entire season. I mean, I think it'll be fun to see him next year. And
It was one of
if
those
we can
names
get
I
him
saw
a
you whisper you wrote it down, but I was like, what did he do this year? I don't remember seeing him in
exactly,
highlight packages. I don't.
yeah,
You say he was on the podium. I don't remember seeing. What does he look like?
yeah,
I don't know any of this.
yeah. And like I said, if he can go out and maybe get, a couple, more podiums in the first 3 or 4 races of the season, I think that might help elevate him a little bit out of this kind of like, who is this kid? People will turn and be like, all right, here's somebody we need to be starting to pay attention to.
It's going to be the profile piece of who is Josh Pearson. No, seriously, who is he?
Who is Josh Pierce? We need to know. Um, you know, I think, like I said, next year is going to be a season for him where he's going to have to improve, and really show that he deserves to be there. This was his second season, I think, and so he's going into his third season, and you know,
Going to be a flashpoint
it,
for a lot of drivers next year, I feel, because there's a lot of names this year that I recognise from the year before, and I always think when that happens in F2 and F3, if I'm coming in year after year and I'm seeing the same few names, that's not good because it means that you're still there and you've maybe not done
right,
as well as you should have done, and
right,
that pressure in the third season, especially, like you say, is coming into it. And it does make me excited for the 27 season because potentially there's going to be a bunch of people I've never heard of, which is great because then I've got zero expectations and it could all be fun. But it does mean next year there's a lot of pressure on a lot of drivers. And yeah, it kind of underlies the point that maybe he can be really consistent in the way that you were saying and get on the podium a couple of times. But in a season where you've got those other five drivers ahead of him, somehow you're in sixth and you're completely anonymous.
yeah, right,
And how do you kind of like it's kind of what can you're learning what to do on track and you're going to improve that for next season, but you need to be doing something off track as well because you know we're going like you were on the podium twice, but if we had a lineup of people, could we point him out to you? Probably not, and that's
exactly,
concerning for,
yeah,
for people like us who watch it. Never mind
right,
someone else.
yeah. So, well, that wraps up our year in review for the Indy Next 2025 campaign. And yeah, I mean, all in all, I mean, good season, even with Dennis Howard kind of running away with it, but
It was like IndyCar, even with the runaway, it was still good and
it's
entertaining.
still an
So I think that's the
enjoyable season.
sign of a
Yeah.
good series.
Yeah, yeah. We're going to be back soon with our next episode where we're going to be putting together our dream 2026 team lineup. And I have a feeling this one is going to be filled with uh, European driver names that Timo's familiar
That
with
you
that
don't know.
I don't know, and American drivers that Timo has no idea who they are. So
We might have to have some sort of agreement, have our lists done by Sunday, so that we can Google all of Monday who
time
the
to
hell these other
review
people
and
we've chosen are.
critique it. Yeah. So should be a lot of fun. Just kind of something silly to do here while we got some time to kill before St. Pete. So
I did this with Formula 2 recently, and I butchered the entire grid essentially that we've got this year, and I was incredibly harsh with it. And then I was trying to fill it with drivers, and I think there's 22 seats available. I got to maybe 15 or 16. I was like, oh no, I maybe called too many of them, and
yeah.
I'm struggling to fill seats now because I've been too harsh. So I might have to learn a couple of lessons there before next
Yeah,
week.
should still be a lot of fun. So, all right. Well, we'll see everybody in our next episode. Thank you, everyone.